Welcome to The Inner Adventure, a series where ecology, psychology, and nature meet. I'm Dr. Ken Jennings, a psychologist in private practice. My co-host is Lutz Otto, founding director of Spirited Adventures, specializing in wilderness walking safaris. Our guest today is Grant Hine, a nature therapist and life coach, and author of many books, his most recent being Mindful Nature. Grant, thank you very much for being part of our conversation today.
Thanks very much, Ken and Lutz. I look forward to it. It's always good to talk about things because it makes people think, and there are a lot of people not thinking.
Yes, I think, I just always look forward to these wonderful conversations that Lutz and myself have, and obviously the last conversation that we had with you, I thought was really fascinating about forest bathing. And today I thought we would take this conversation a little bit further and talk a little bit about expectations, resistances, and mindset that one needs to consider as you enter into nature. Now, I know that together, Lutz and Grant, I mean, you guys have got probably about 60 years of experience together, guiding people in nature, in wilderness contexts. And I'd like to just start with you, Grant, about the sense of expectation when somebody comes into wilderness. What should they be expecting, or shouldn't they expect, or can we just open it up and just hear a little bit about expectations from your perspective?
A lot of people come to game reserves, to Africa, to get into wilderness areas, but they come with a lot of preconceived ideas. And that's been based on what they've been exposed to through the media, through various television programs, films, what people have said, magazine articles, books. And those preconceived ideas are, they've basically created an expectation. So people come to a particular area and they expect to see certain aspects of wildlife. They think they're going to see certain animal behavior patterns and get an experience very similar to what they've already seen through the media. And unfortunately, it's an expectation that nature won't necessarily live up to, because nature is in its own time. It's not conforming to any preconceived idea of itself, if I can put it that way. So a lot of people come to nature with certain preconceived ideas, and that leads them to have certain expectations, and an expectation is basically formed on the way they're being conditioned. And for me, it boils down to their ecological self. And a lot of people have no idea what the ecological self is. They've been in touch with nature, or they haven't been in touch with nature. Ecological self is the way we express ourselves in relationship to nature. So a lot of people, their ecological self is almost at a subconscious level. Because we've all got it. We basically, as I said previously, we've stemmed from nature. We've spent 99.9% of our human existence in nature. So it's at a subconscious level. But a lot of people have no idea what their ecological self is. So they have certain expectations based on preconceived ideas, and it's not really what nature is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Lutz, do you want to add to this? What are your thoughts?
Ken, I agree with Grant. I think that many people come into either the game reserve environment, the wilderness environment, with a set of preconceived ideas, and what these preconceived ideas from word bang result in is pressure on the guide as well as the client, because the client is expecting to see these things. The guide is desperately trying to please the client. What unfolds then is one of two things. It either takes a path that nature plays along, or exactly the opposite happens. I think where the opposite happens, we start dealing with emotions that could include initially a little bit of frustration, then a little bit of anger, and it becomes an emotional roller coaster for the client. They could feel annoyance, and as the guide connects more with the client, they feel increasing amounts of pressure, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the journey goes well and nature plays out according to what they'd seen, and this sometimes happens, sometimes we're just incredibly blessed, and from word go, we have great encounters and great experiences, then the client feels good. As a guide or as somebody leading that experience, I always feel, sure, have they really experienced what the beauty of these places offer? Have they really experienced the importance of coming in with a zero mind or no expectation, and then letting things unfold and just going with curiosity versus this very fixed mindset? I think there's a lot of thought or a lot of thought leadership written about the difference between fixed and growth mindset. And I by far prefer a client to come in with a growth mindset, open heart, open mind, open will, lots of curiosity. And I think that's when safaris take on all wilderness experiences, nature experiences, mountain experiences, as Grant does, coastal experiences, take on their own magic and their own uniqueness.
Can I just get back to Grant? Grant, this ecological self you were talking about, can you link that to some extent? Would I be right in saying if somebody comes into nature with preconceived ideas, expectations, it actually prevents the ecological self from emerging? Would I be right in connecting that?
Absolutely. If somebody comes with preconceived ideas, they are basically preventing themselves from connecting to nature to discover that ecological self, because the only way you can really discover your own true nature is through that link you have with nature. So if you come with preconceived ideas, you're severing that link, or you're preventing that link to take place between yourself and nature. So it's really up to the guide to be able to put the guest in a situation where he sort of gets rid of all the expectations, and he just informs guests or clients, whatever we want to call them, that nature reveals itself in its own time, in its own way. What we see is what we see. Almost the only thing a guide can guarantee is we will see the evidence of what you were trying to hopefully see ultimately, because there's always evidence. You might not see the actual animal you're trying to see. But just seeing the evidence is an experience in itself, and it's a reconnecting experience, because you see the evidence, let's say, of lion tracks. Now you know there are lions in the area, and you develop a certain connection between your guest and the lion tracks, which ultimately connects them to the actual animal, even if they might not see the actual animal. So I think the ecological self in most people is repressed, or at a subconscious level. And the moment a guide can change that, can give them a different perspective of nature, reconnect nature, not just show nature, I think they will discover their ecological self.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. I mean, Lutz and Grant, would it be fair to say if somebody has never experienced a wilderness guiding experience, that it would be natural for them to want to see a lion or want to see one of the big five? But the more time you spend in nature, the less expectations one has of a preconceived experience. In other words, then you allow nature to reveal itself, and you experience nature in what it brings, what it reveals. So Lutz, I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? Like a first-time person coming onto a walking safari?
I draw the distinction between expectation and intention. I like my clients to come with clear intention. An intention could be, I'm going on a walking safari, I'm going to stay in a tented camp, and we're going to spend 5 days exploring this environment. That very clearly sets the playing field, and allows me to deliver against intention. In terms of mindset, I strongly encourage, as Grant has pointed out, from word go, that we go into this environment with an open mind, and let the environment play out as it plays out. As I pointed out earlier, the moment we try and push a particular experience, it invariably doesn't happen, or alternatively, it's a fabricated experience. The bigger wilderness areas, so shifting away from the lodge environments where we're sitting on radios, and we often have a very good idea of where particular animals are. The bigger wilderness areas make it very difficult to operate in a way that is bound by expectation. A lot of the areas that we run our backpacking safaris in don't have vehicles traversing through them. If the guide is not able to work with an open slate or an open sheet, it can be a very challenging environment to work in. You need to, as Grant said earlier, be able to interpret at a level from soil to these big mega herbivores, and feel comfortable with that, and feel comfortable with silence. So yeah, lots of talk there.
I mean, Grant, any other thoughts at the moment about expectations, maybe people's response to nature? I mean, have you seen people become resistant with nature to some extent when they're being encountered with a certain situation that, they've had this preconceived idea it should work this way?
I think a lot of people with their expectations, they are not focusing what is right in front of them. They're not focusing on the now, in the present moment. They're always expecting something, so they're looking to what's around the next corner. And I'm trying to encourage guides just to get to stop anywhere, whether you're walking or driving, to stop anywhere, give people 5 minutes of silence, and then say, what are you noticing? Mm-hmm. It just gets them into the present moment. Whereas the expectations that people build up is they want to see everything that they've seen through the media. They want to see lions killing. They want to see leopards hunting. They want to see wild dogs chasing. And it doesn't always happen. Well, it does always happen, but we don't always see it. We're not always there. But as soon as they have expectations, they're missing out on what they could be experiencing in the now, right in the present moment. And we just miss out on so much. So I think it's up to guides to bring people into the now, to get rid of those expectations. And I mean, the bottom line is we should have no expectations, because if we have expectations, there's a good chance you're going to be disappointed. If you have no expectations, you just go with the flow, let nature reveal itself. Every now and again, you just say, what am I noticing? Oh, wow, I didn't know that was there. I didn't hear that bird calling. So I think that a lot of people come with expectations, and when they don't see what they expect to see, then they're really disappointed. Yes. And as Lutz said, it puts a lot of pressure on the guide to perform, because they say, oh, we saw that on TV, we want to see that here. And it's then up to the guide and the ability of the guide to be able to say, listen, nature doesn't just perform for us just because we've paid for it. Nature does its own thing. We're just lucky to witness whatever we come across.
Sure. I really connect to that statement about, nature doesn't reveal what we want because we've paid for it. I mean, that's such an interesting concept, from an economic perspective. People paying huge amounts of money to experience, like you say, seeing lion or wild dog chasing. And yet it might then not even reveal a lion or wild dog, but maybe a couple of, impala, which most people see. And then their interpretation, the people's interpretation who are experiencing it, would be disappointment. would be maybe, sure, let down, a sense of being let down because of this preconceived idea about, we've paid for something and why hasn't it delivered? Lutz, we're coming to the end of our conversation. I mean, do you just want to add, from your perspective, anything further?
I think a point that speaks to all three of our work is that these environments create wonderful platforms to explore the human psychology deeper. And I think all three of us undertake nature-based work. I love to have a human check-in as well. So not just what's going on around me, what's going on inside me. So the inner adventure, what's going on in my inner world. And that's different for each person. If we have that early check-in and we've created the trust in our group to allow for honest check-ins, it makes the process of delivering a safari that much easier. We all think differently, we all behave differently, we're all unique. I enjoy a check-in. That way I don't project what I think somebody might be wanting to see or expect. And it really affords me the opportunity to start understanding who I'm working, what they're thinking, and also how they evolve. So at the end of a safari and realizing the type of work that we do, I like to have a checkout. So we sit around the fire and we talk about what went well, what went less well. What am I leaving with? How did I feel when I started, and how did I feel when as I leave this special place? I think that check-in on a human level for me is really important too. It's not just what's going on around, but what's going on inside.
Lutz, I mean that's fascinating because this check-in, I think, relates quite strongly to Grant's sense of this ecological self. When we check in into the self. And I like your idea about checking out when you're sitting around the campfire and you start talking about, what went well or what didn't go well, what were you seeing, what were you thinking. I mean, that's a wonderful combination of checking in and checking out. Grant, just some final thoughts from you?
I think we need to take into account the fact that everybody perceives nature differently. And as I may have said on our previous talk, is that nature reveals itself to each individual in their own personal way. So walking with a group of guests, coming across elephants, they perceive those elephants at a very individual level. And what is that elephant saying to those people? So we've got to allow for that. We can't say, well, everybody sees reality in the same way that I do as the guide. We need to take that into account. And I think that's where the ecological self comes in. Everybody's ecological self is totally unique, totally different, and they relate to nature in a very different way. But I think at the end of, let's say, a wilderness walk, people have definitely been changed through their experience, which has been facilitated by the guide, but nature provides the change to their experience. And I think, I think it's very important that guides start to realize this, to understand that people are there. It could be a life-changing experience for them, and hopefully it is. Just briefly, I do two little tests in some of the experiences I conduct. I say to people, you find a message in a bottle that's washed up on the beach. What does the message say? And I do that at the beginning of the experience. At the end of the experience, I say, you are now going to write a message and put it in a bottle and send it off. And you'll see the change over 4 or 5 days in people's whole philosophy of life, from the first message that they receive to the message they're sending out. And it's actually quite remarkable. So we could do this in a wilderness experience as well. And that's what I think we're talking about, the check-in and the check-out.
Grant, that's such a fascinating exercise that you give to your clients who come on one of your guiding experiences. But what's really hit me today is without expectation in nature, there's the biggest chance for an internal transformation. That was a fundamental message that I think came through in our conversation today. The other point that I was thinking about is that, you know, nature has no expectations on us. I think nature just wants us to be and connect with the processes that unfold in nature. And I think if we come into a nature experience with that sort of attitude, with diminished expectation, with an open heart, we give ourselves the best possibility of an inner transformation. It was a wonderful conversation, and thank you very much for coming on our inner adventure, Grant. You really added so much more breadth and depth to the conversation today. Thank you very much for watching the inner adventure, and until next time, take care, and we'll see you again.